Hello, I'm Dhani Harrison, and this is the LSQ podcast. I feel like Stephen Toast from Toast of London, the guy, yeah.
What's up? Thanks for pressing play on episode 103. I'm Jenny LSQ. Last fall, singer-songwriter and film score composer Dhani Harrison released an impressive and dynamic new solo album called Understanding, which is now available on vinyl as well, by the way, and which gave me the perfect opportunity to finally interview him in depth for the LSQ podcast. I've known Dhani for closing in on 20 years now, and I've always wanted to ask him some of these questions about his personal musical evolution. We connected over Zoom late last year to talk about how he first discovered and explored his musical talents with encouragement from his dad, George Harrison, how skateboarding with his cousin in LA as a kid sparked his obsession with the Wu-Tang Clan, and about, in more recent years, how he actually got to collaborate with RZA. Why, in spite of his abiding love for Jimi Hendrix, he never wanted to be a shredder himself. Why he was so geeked to have Blur's Graham Coxon playing both guitar and saxophone on Understanding, and more. Here we go.
Hello.
Hello.
I was just trying to get on there. It was giving me the spinny beach ball for a second.
Not the spinny beach ball, dear Lord.
Beach ball of death.
How are you?
I'm really well. How about yourself?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, right on. I'm coming to you today from my studio. I can just pan around so you can see. This is my place of work.
Nice. This is your studio at home.
This is a studio in England. Yes, this is my dad's old studio. This is where I work now.
Oh, incredible. Well, it's so good to see you. I was trying to think of the last time I saw you, which was definitely
2017, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere around there, definitely pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And I so appreciate you connecting with me to do this interview.
Thanks for reaching out. And it's been a funny old few years, hasn't it? I was just talking with a chap, and he was saying about he referred to the album that came out before this as like a Nostradamus album, like predicted the entire next few years. He's like, you said Upside Down before Stranger Things. You were saying it's not like it used to be, and then you were singing about the war on false before fake news. And he was like, I said, I promise to start writing about some nice things, and maybe they'll come true too.
But you did not do that, did you? That's
No.
not exactly what you did, is it?
Well, it was like there was like
Dhani.
the before album and then the after album, But yeah, it's I think that it's hard for people to find their voice in the times when everyone is just so hyper divided and sensitive, and everyone's been gaslit to be so critical, and that whole like, if you're not this, then you're this, and if you're not that, then you're that. Then it's like this false binary world that we live in, which it's an absolute crock of shit, It just because this doesn't mean this, and just because that doesn't mean that. It's like we're all humans, and there has to be a kind of return to this non-judgy shame culture, because the absence of love is judgment, and judgment is the absence of love, and love is the absence of judgment. That is where this record's coming from, and trying to like unite yourself. And I know it's like we feel pretty fragmented, and also the whole world's been through a trauma of being locked in their houses and told what to do, and people go back to thinking that the world's the same or whatever, but really the effects on people's mental health and what we've had, definitely in my country, suicide rates never went back down, 400%, and never went back down. It's like, and I see it, and I see it on the faces of people when I walk down the street. I see definitely a lot of unhealed trauma. And so, just trying to keep it real and live in the forest and grow my own food and do all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and to kind of dig in even a little further on that, you're talking for listeners about your new solo album, Understanding. And one of the things I noticed listening to it, because you've done so much work on film scores in recent years, and this album sounds, similar to the first one, like it could be a film score. It has that kind of expansiveness and movement, and it creates its own world. And so I'm curious, what is that movie about? If the album is the score to a film, what is the film Understanding about?
Well, and we're all the lead characters in our own lives, and it's, well, at least I hope we are. It's my score to my life, and I can only write about what I know. And that first record was, I was going through a very big transitional period in my life, a lot of huge changes. That was like the uncertainty of the sort of driving at night with headlights on. You don't know, you can't see the destination, but you can see the end of the road ish, but you can only see as far as the light. So you have to take it on faith that there is going to be a destination. That's the kind of feeling that I was having when I was doing that record. Like, we were building to the second film, and the second film was when like the second act was when the shit hit the fan. It was kind of like just the first act. And then I'm not sure if this will be a trilogy, this series. It might just be two, but I definitely think that it's funny because it also got an in title, in parallel, and then Inner Standing. And Inner Standing is just back to like what we were saying at the beginning, which is that whole, like, if someone's telling you something and forcing their opinion on you, then they're overstanding. And if you're understanding, then you're being, explained to, and you're beholding to. And to understand is just to comprehend from a place of love and detachment, where there is no extremity and no attachment, and you're not forcing yourself or being forced. It's that place that people need to start coming from if we're to weather the next few decades, which is, if you come at things from a place of love, then you'll always end up on the right side of history. But if you come up from a place of fear and anger, or just even being understanding, it's can quite often, you can end up confused.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so interesting. Yeah, I've never thought of the word understanding in that context of like,
you
yeah,
stand
of
under
the
the authority of what's being explained to you.
yeah.
Yeah, and words are magic. So when you say I understand, you are acquiescing your ness,
Yeah.
which we all know isn't a very good idea. So, I think that, like, trying to navigate and just waiting a little bit longer. Like, I feel like if the record had come out a year or two earlier, it wouldn't have, or a year earlier, it would have been berated. And if it had come out later, it wouldn't have made sense, or it would have missed its mark. So it was very weird the way it came out organically this October, because it just came out in the middle of all this stuff that's going on in the world. It kind of like landed exactly where it was supposed to land. And I've had so many people tell me, they're like, when did you write this? Like, how did you write it very quickly and get it out? I was like, no, this is, I Nostradamus did again. It's weird. I don't know. And I don't know why. I guess that's the collective consciousness, or whatever they call it. It's just, if you can get into a place where you're quiet. The first record, I was by the sea, and I was just alone by the sea writing. And the second record, I was in the forest, because I'd moved back from Los Angeles for the first time in 20 years, back to England. It's nice to be back here. And plus, I'm working, whenever I would do a film score, I would always go back to England and use the studio here, because I got all the guitar collection, and I got all of the instruments and all of my dad's old analog stuff, and plus all of my new digital stuff. So I had my office that I worked at in LA, which I shut down, and I'm building another one out here now. But yeah, it was another complete transformation. It's funny, these records, both of them have been during completely transformative times for me. And I feel like I found my feet now in England.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this does feel, it sounds like from what you're saying, that this constitutes a different chapter for you as a recording artist than in previous times with the different bands that you had. That you have a new perspective or new understanding of what you want to be doing as a recording artist. And I'm curious how much this past, I guess, decade really of the film score stuff has pivoted your view of making music on your own as an artist.
Definitely, and as a human as well, like it's just not just as a recording artist, as a person, wanting to be closer to nature. My time in LA was up. I couldn't live in the city anymore, and indeed, like a lot of the neighborhood that I was in was destroyed and never recovered. And I'd moved out of the city just before that had happened. And I was gonna either move up north of LA or move back to England, and I ended up moving back north of LA and then moving back to England, just trying to get more nature and have some headspace to record and experiment, do some scores, do some albums. Like I've been working on. It's funny because America in LA, it's so work, 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 work. Everyone's doing something. There's always like I had like two TV shows and a film at the same time, and then I'd be doing an album, and there would always be live shows, and I'd be touring, and it was like there was a lot going on. And in England, it's like I feel like it's not as much, there's nowhere near as much going on, but what's going on is like a really high level. So it was like as if I'd kind of swapped quantity for more quality. And with me at this stage in my life, I was very, very happy with that. I did go mad for the first year, and it was like I didn't have my community, and I was here, and we had all the lockdowns and everything. But that was the great thing about that. I kind of remember making a phone call to Nigel Godrich and being like, help, I'm in a studio by myself. I've been in a studio for a year by myself. I'm a lonely astronaut. I'm going mad. I need some perspective. Will you come over? And bless him, he came over and listened to everything that I'd recorded from start to finish, which I wasn't expecting because, he's a busy man, and gave me insight, and I was like, oh, thanks. I was like, I wasn't sure if this was enough, and he was like, oh no, you've got enough. Like I could make 4 albums from this. Like go and finish it. Like stop messing around. You stop writing stuff. Just go and finish it. And it was before I'd kind of put all the lyrics on my record. It was like the whole thing as an instrumental score, because it kind of happened more as like a feeling first. It's like the opposite way from the last record. It was it's kind of two sides of a mirror. And then I ended up, the only other person that wanted to kind of work, who was going mad in his studio, was Graham Coxon. So who's, one of my biggest heroes in the guitar since I've been a teenager. He's just got the best guitar sound out of anyone. I was obviously a huge fan of Blur growing up, and I think a lot of the way I play is kind of based, well, he's been a huge influence definitely on my guitar. And then it was like, suddenly he's playing saxophone. It was pretty weird. I'm like, I've been alone for months and months. Now I'm in a studio with Graham Coxon playing saxophone on my record. This doesn't make any sense.
What is reality anyway?
Am I dreaming this? Yeah, is this a weird dream? Like, what's going on? Yeah, and like I got to go and visit Johnny Greenwood one day, and when he was recording with all of his Indian musicians doing Janan 2, the second Janan record, which I don't think is out yet. So I got to play on that, so there was a piece of score that I was working on with like Hans Zimmer. So I was like, okay, well, like the people I'm working with it's incredible. It's just that there's these long periods of solitude in between, which I've now kind of become okay with, because it's not as if I'm not getting the things that I need musically. I'm working with the most incredible people, and all of the years that I was in LA, I never worked with those people.
Let's rewind. Let's go back in time to baby Dhani. When did you first feel like a creative urge? Yeah, when did you first desire to make something, and that the feeling that you now associate with budding creativity? When did that first strike?
I feel like I was obsessed with Cab Calloway because of the film Blues Brothers, and I seem to like remember learning the muted trumpet solo to Minnie the Moocher on like a kazoo when I was like 3. but I got it, like I actually, or 5, and I got it, and it was like my dad was like, oh, he's just played the solo from Minnie the Moocher on a kazoo. That means he can replicate that in his brain. And then my dad was like, oh, you're a parrot. So he would be like, right, tell me what you think of this. And he'd play me some crazy sitar piece. And then I would remember it, or and I could play piano, but I wasn't reading music that well. It was always easier to hear it. So I'd always pretend that I was reading the music, and then I'd never turn the page, and my piano teacher would hit me on the hand And, and it would be that like, you're not reading the music, are you? No. That was when I kind of realized, oh, I think there's more to this than just learning other people's music. Like, I feel like maybe I'd be better off making my own rather than trying to fit into the body of a classical piano player. And I never really practiced that much. And like guitar, I was 15 when it just clicked. One day I just could play. It was very strange. It was like DNA activated or something. I just only listened to Jimi Hendrix. You know what I mean? Like I'd listen to Cab Calloway, and then I went through a big Buddy Holly phase.
And so, yeah, in between the kazoo demonstration and guitar just clicking, was it important to you to keep trying? I mean, did it feel like music for you? Obviously, in your household, there's, it's a big deal the way that you grew up, but nonetheless, I've interviewed a lot of people for this show talking about this very same topic, and it's always fascinating to me the separate bubble that a person is in from, they're connected to what's going on, and some people's parents are musical and some people's parents are entirely not,
Yeah.
but there's still this individual orb that you have around you of like your level of engagement with it. So I'm curious, between Cab Calloway and guitar just clicking, did it feel important to you, like, I want to play music, I want to follow this feeling and see what develops?
There was a piano in the hall in my house, and someone thought I should have piano lessons, and I really wished I'd continued to like a grading level, but it was weird. It was like I learned to kind of play. I mean, I could recite classical music, and then I stopped, and I also wanted to play the clarinet, but I stank at the clarinet. I couldn't get a note. I was like squeaking, and I couldn't get it. One of the things I still stink at is clarinet, unlike Graham Coxon, who can really wail. So yeah, and then I remember, then it was like I listened to loads of metal. So it was like Sepultura and Iron Maiden. There was a lot of Iron Maiden, a lot of AC/DC, a lot of Metallica, a lot of Sepultura, and obviously always Jimi Hendrix and Cream, Jimi Hendrix and Cream. Yeah, and then I guess like around 14, it was like full blown Wu-Tang takeover of my music situation, because I spent a lot of time. My cousin was the same age as me, and he lived in LA, and we both skateboarded. And so I'd get all the skate punk bands, but it was like, I remember him giving me a copy of Return to the 36 Chambers, the dirty version by Old Dirty Bastard. And like, it was over once I got that. That was just too good. And I didn't want to be a shredder either. I didn't want to like shred the guitar. So I kind of just, that's why when Graham came along, and I always remember someone saying like, I don't want my guitar to sound like a guitar. I want it to sound like a scary monster. And he does play guitar on this record that sounds like Godzilla coming out of the water, like this really, yeah. That I was interested in,
More the textures and the tones than the shred, than the notes,
Then yeah, the speed of the notes, more the like soul of it, like Jimi Hendrix pulling demons out of a guitar.
And you do some rhyming on Understanding. Did you influenced and inspired by Wu-Tang, like as a kid? Where did you try to freestyle? And
Oh, definitely. And I would no, I was always more interested in, I mean, I could recite every lyric from every record, like happily, but I was more of like into the production, because I was obsessed with kung fu films. So I knew where every sample came from. And I could be like, no way, he's taken that backing, the 3 seconds of score out of the back of Master of the Flying Guillotine, and then looped it and made that into like the backing track, and the track's called Flying Guillotine, so obviously I'm right. You know what I mean? Like, having seen all the films, that's why I got on so well with RZA when we finally met. It was like just nerd guys talking about kung fu films and samplers. You know what I mean?
yeah, because you scored a film of his fairly recently.
I did. I met him back in early 2000s when we did 8 Diagrams, because I did a couple of tracks with him. I did one on that, and I did one on his plays guitar on his Digi Snacks as well, which was Bobby Digital's second record. And then years after that, because we were pals, he was too busy doing the Wu saga, the American Saga. the Wu Chronicles or whatever it was, which was a fantastic show. I don't know if you've seen it. It's the fictitious, the sort of biopic series, and the acting is brilliant. Yeah, he was busy doing that and doing all the music for that, and he was directing his film at the same time, and he just got, I think, too much on. So he called me and Paul, and we took that one for him, which was an honor.
Yeah. You reference Paul, and I think that's a good segue kind of into this other section of your creative life, which is sort of leading into your early 20s and starting to do professional music projects and not just being a fan anymore. So tell me about, I mean, one of the main things I'm very curious about, that very long collaboration now with Paul in all of these different areas where you have collaborated, but also just what that phase was like, where I know you were working with your dad on the Brainwashed stuff during that same kind of era, and presumably learning about the professional application in adulthood of this stuff you'd been studying as a kid. So tell me about kind of what was brewing with you at that time and what that felt like.
I think that, I'd been making records with my dad because obviously I lived above the studio. So he'd never have an engineer. He'd always need me to come and drop him in. So I learned how to like operate 24 track tape, and don't mess it up because you'll erase my guitar solo. So they're like, no pressure or anything. You know what I mean? He'd be playing like, I remember him doing like the solo for Cheer Down, which was a song that they were using for the soundtrack of Lethal Weapon 2. And that was a great score, by the way, with Eric Clapton and David Sanborn, Michael Kamen. So yeah, Michael Kamen was my godfather, and he obviously scored Die Hard and Lethal Weapon and all these, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, all of these fantastic, Brazil, Terry Gilliam, like some of these incredible scores, some beautiful stuff. That was the first time I'd ever used computers to make music, was going around to his house. I remember I had a project when I was at university, and the only class I failed ever was called Music and Computer. And
Oops.
yeah, so that's funny, isn't it? And Michael, I did my project with Michael. He helped me do this piece of music, and they failed me for it. And then afterwards, I said, "What the?" And he goes, "Oh, probably should have told you. I failed out of Juilliard." And but they gave me an honorary degree, a doctorate or whatever. So I was hanging out with Michael Kamen, doing a lot of playing around on computers, and I remember just after my father had died, I was playing around with his Giga Studio, and that was like the week that he passed away, and listening to they programmed the whole of Holst's The Planets, and just sitting there listening in Michael's office. And it was incredible. And that was when I was like, oh, I like doing this. And Ollie Hex, who started the New Number 2 with me, he was a filmmaker. So we wanted to do film photography, design, and music. And I was more into design and music, and he was more into music and film. And I'd made films in university and done the soundtrack to them and stuff. Then obviously Brainwashed, I finished that with Jeff Lynne. And that was when I really learned how to use like Pro Tools, and because it just kind of started Sound Tools and Pro Tools. And so that was when I really got into digital music production and started making my own music on computers. Before that, I was using tape, and it's when you're by yourself, it's a lot of a more difficult process, I think. If you're 18 and trying to use a 24-track tape machine by yourself and make a demo, it's a lot easier to do it now on your laptop, Then I think New Number 2 was always going to become a sort of composing band. So when we were in the middle of a tour, and we got a call from Richard LeGravenese, who said, "Can you come and score this film, Beautiful Creatures?" They flew us out to Abbey Road. We got to record in the same room that my dad spent his, youth in, and Paul Hicks, obviously, I think he's downstairs right now, actually. I don't know. I haven't seen him for ages, but I think he's here talking to my mum. That was like, oh, wow, we got a big Hollywood film. It worked really well. So we wanted to carry on doing that, and started doing, just immediately got inundated with stuff. And then after 2018, I think I took a break. I'd done a series that was just, there was a lot of corrections and a lot of, it just kind of went round and round in circles. We got burnt out, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go back. And that was when I was like, I need to do another new #2 album. And what I thought was a new #2 album actually turned into in Parallel, which was the Dhani Harrison record. So I got to the end of it and I said, well, no one else has done anything on it. So, and I can keep releasing stuff under a pseudonym or as under a band name. And I'd done Fistful of Mercy as well. So it was like, I had some successful bands and then just decided, okay, well, I was 40 before I did my own solo record. So I might go back to being in bands now. I don't know. I like being in bands.
Does it feel like a different process when you're writing something that is for you under your name, as opposed to writing something for a score that is going to be sort of anonymized in that way?
Yeah, totally. I think it's a lot. I mean, I can do score music very quickly. It comes quite naturally to me, but I don't necessarily like, I always look at my scores as like an album. So like when we did Beautiful Creatures, it came out as a vinyl, and it's like, it's a great vinyl, and when we did Seattle Road, Seattle Road was actually the kind of prequel to In Parallel. So that record kind of has it's the same master, it's the same mix, it's a lot of the same instruments, and it's an instrumental score. But if you listen to that score to the film Seattle Road, you can hear the beginning of In Parallel in it. And the director did a second film called Future Days, which I believe is being shopped around now, or it's not out. I think it's at festivals, which we did the score to, Paul and I. And that happened just before I did Inner Standing. So it was kind of like riffing back and forth with this director, Ryan David, who's really cool and he loves music. So I got to kind of go crazy with all my instruments first, and then that inspired the album that then came after it.
Oh yeah, you're getting to workshop stuff sort of while you're on the clock for the thing.
Yeah.
You're getting to test out sounds and tones and mic placements and all that shit.
And you're building lots of preset sounds, and you're building lots of stuff that then it becomes like a clips board in your computer. And the stuff that people don't want, it's like, if sometimes some of the best stuff that I've done, people are like, yeah, it doesn't do anything for us. I'm like, oh really? So I can have that then. Thanks a lot. Like I feel Ghost Garden was one of those tracks. I think there's a couple tracks off both records that were bits of music that had been rejected for film, and I was very happy that they were.
It's fascinating just thinking about it now, that in the scores, obviously whoever makes the score is an artist who gets credit and proper credit and accolades for that, and awards and this kind of thing, but it is somewhat anonymous and it's not about you, and that's one application of your musical abilities. But then at the same time, it is the same artist. You can hear if it's Hans Zimmer, or you know what I mean, if it's Danny Elfman, or if it's Johnny Greenwood, or if it's Dhani Harrison. It's like those are albums that express the same musical character, and that's not cheating. That's actually like that's what makes that artist, sort of enduring and kind of meta.
I love Jeff Barrow and his scoring composing work. Jeff from Portishead, another great example. Johnny Greenwood's score for There Will Be Blood, and what was the other one? Oh God, my brain's just gone blank.
Phantom Thread.
Phantom Thread, yeah, it's incredible stuff.
And RZA too. RZA does films like the Ghost Dog score.
RZA's scores are great. RZA's scores are great, and like some of the really good, like great on the nose, best Wu-Tang moments turn up in some of RZA's scores. I like that. I like the idea of just being able to, like, all the best stuff comes when the director just lets you do what you want. They just kind of support you and keep the studios off your back. And then that's why it's important to form relationships with directors and build up with them, because that's how you get these great scores.
In your evolving songwriting process over the course of your life, can you think of any sort of major discoveries or moments of realization you had as an evolving songwriter that really changed how you moved forward from there?
I think definitely working with people like Jeff Lynne and just seeing some of the quirky kind of production things that they do, things that they won't do and things that they will do, and just being like, I guess I'm a bit more like gorilla like that. Like, I'll just do anything if it works, if it sounds great, you know? But then you see people like Nigel Godrich and his method, and you're just like, how did you develop this? I guess it's just becoming a nerd and really understanding the equipment that you're using, so that so it becomes like an instrument, and it's not like computers aren't getting in the way. So I've started moving back to more like tape stuff, using more like MPCs and stuff that sounds a bit dirtier and a bit warmer and a bit more analog. Like, I've just done a full refurb of this studio. As you can see, I've got my studio is essentially a laptop, but I've got the tape running. So it's combining all of the different kind of techniques of all the people that I've worked with, and trying to absorb all of those techniques into like some new style that I haven't quite formatted yet.
I think you have formulated it. It sounds fucking awesome. Let's talk a bit about lyrics, because, you know, we were speaking earlier about the themes that are on Understanding, and your songs actually have lyrics that mean something. I don't mean to say that in a sort of grandma-ish, get off my lawn way, these kids and their lyrics nowadays, because I find a lot of depth in lyricism from young artists, but it feels like it's important to you to have your songs convey something that is worth saying while you have their attention. And I'm curious, yeah, how has your lyric writing process kind of developed? When did you first start, working on writing lyrics for songs?
I started writing lyrics for songs when I was like 10, and just writing. I'd take songs that existed and just write new lyrics for them, and thought that that was the same thing, you know? And then they just live in my head for the rest of my life, and still can't remember the lyrics to them. So I've always written lyrics. I think things that really inspired me, again, like Bob Dylan, obviously, ODB, like RZA, those people. I found a lot of hip hop like very expressive. I like the proper hip hop, Public Enemy, NWA, Wu Tang.
Do you feel like you apply like a kind of a scrutiny, to your lyrics?
Yeah, we call it lyric police, where it's just like you got to write what you want to write, but then, like, especially if you're in a band, you've got the other guys just come in and then rip it apart, and then it's like, but if it's good, then it gets whoa, yeah, The process that I'm working on at the moment, this album another new album that I'm working on, which I can't tell you who is with, but it's very, very like rigid and structured towards like, we're crafting it. My stuff will kind of take a while to hear, and then it'll just kind of come out fully formed. But also, again, I'm like a parrot, so it's like I like to sample a little bit of all of the bullshit that's been perpetrated on me. I remember, so it's like you got to get that in there, and if you can transmute your feelings from like that anger of being forced to understand something, and transmute that into like having fun, making fun of it, and also living in love, then that's kind of what music means to me, because it's alchemy. You're changing a frequency from maybe sadness to love. And I was discussing this with a lot of people, and it's like, if you've lost a parent, there's a journey that you go through, and if you can capture that musically, everyone I've suddenly, whether it's a singer-songwriter or a hip-hop album or a film score, like some things that resonate with me, I'm like, oh, what was that person going through when they did that? It's like, oh, that was when they lost their mom, or like that was when they lost their dad, or and it's like, wow, okay, it shows up differently for everyone, but it's like that pain or that battery that you get, your sadness becomes like a superpower, like you get like this extra charge, and you can be more bold, and you feel kind of protected, like you can just say you can just say the truth, which is what gets you in trouble these days. And so having to be able to transmute that enough so that people can interpret it and yet they still know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and also it feels to me as well that you care about conveying things that are helpful to people to hear. You know, the idea of highlighting a way of looking at things that has been helpful to you, that, you know, maybe because in a way of how you grew up in a family that was tapped into that stuff, you've been stewing in it for a long time. But I wonder, is it on a conscious level important to you to say, I want to share some of this with other people? It's not just about my journey and processing my feelings, but like, I've heard some stuff, I've absorbed some stuff, and this works for me.
Yeah, I think, it's like you see, hopefully they being the listener will hear it through your lens, or they get to filter maybe my perspective or my filter of what everyone else has been experiencing too might shed light on a different way of looking at it, and I because that's what it's been like for me. It's like, I know what's going on, but then suddenly you hear someone write a song about it and you're like, that guy just nailed it, and it resonates, and that's when you really hear it, and then you can't unhear it, and then it starts to change your perspective, and then it's like, well, then it tunes your frequency to that frequency. Like I just did a record with that Mongolian throat singing band Hun He Tu, who are like the most incredible masters of their art, and it's like a film score kind of. It sounds like that. Me and this chap called Carmen Rizzo and the band Hun He Tu. And it's like, I played it to a friend of mine the other day and she just sobbed on the floor, and she was like, it just changed my DNA. And I'm like, that's what happened to me when I first heard their music. So getting on these frequencies, and then the frequencies attract other frequencies, and then more like-minded people come and join that frequency. That's kind of where I want to be, doing stuff with, like, I'm not interested in being famous or working on, being in this mainstream at all. I want to be able to make art with as many different people I can learn from and get different perspectives on the world and just on our own music.
Yeah, right on, Dhani. I think that's a perfect place for us to wrap up.
Well, thank you for being so kind and listening to me, and I hope your move goes very well.
Thank you so much. Thanks again to Dhani, and thank you for listening to the LSQ podcast as we reach the end of episode 103. 104 in a couple of weeks is with Beth Ditto from Gossip, who are back with an incredible new album, their first new one in 12 years, later this month. And subscribe in all the places that allow that option. Feel free to reach out at Jenny LSQ on socials. Talk to you next time.